The White House announced this week that they are going to decide who's in the White House press pool, not the press. Now, the press pool, for those listening at home, is a group of representatives from television, radio, yes, now streaming, and print reporters, usually a wire service like AP or Reuters. And it's a small group of representatives from each one of those realms of media that gets to follow the president around at all times in the more, not in like the residence of the White House, but like in the more intimate spaces like the Oval or on the trips. Something you're not going to take everybody who's in that press briefing room with you when you're the president of the United States. But pool, if you're part of pool, you get to go, and it is your responsibility to report everything he does back to all the other media and the public. And the pool reporting job is very important. It's, the pool is the reason we saw Ronald Reagan get shot. They were covering Ronald Reagan. I mean, he wasn't doing anything extraordinary that day, but pool was there because they always have eyes on the president. Pool was there covering even, President Trump when he got shot before he actually got reelected in Butler, Pennsylvania. Pool has to be there. And as a former reporter at Fox News, and I did White House duty when I was in my very young years there, here and there, pool is like a serious responsibility. You can't fuck up pool. Like you really do have to get it right. And typically the media will decide who can do pool because it's very expensive and everybody understands it's important that you get somebody in there who's really going to tell you what happened. So I will say, for the record, I don't know how I feel about the White House saying we're not now going to decide who's in pool. It's not the same as saying we're going to bring in new voices to the press briefing room. I love all that. But I actually happen to believe the media should decide who's in pool. Because it's a matter of resources. It's just the TV lane alone. And they seem to be saying TV will not change. TV will decide who's doing TV. But the number of wires you've got to get in there to get the cameras ready, getting an experienced photog in there to make sure he gets moments like, God forbid, there's a presidential assassination attempt. Like, you can't fuck around with that. You need true pros who have got a lot of experience, setting up a shot, being ready for breaking news. I speak only from the TV realm because that's the one I know. I got questions about this before I really endorse it or criticize it, but the media's in a full-on meltdown over it. And what they're upset about is that the vaunted media, are starting to lose more and more control about how Trump gets covered and in what way he gets covered. And the more I've been looking at the people objecting, the more I've been recoiling, because the absurdity of some of these people trying to say, like, we are the vaunted media who cannot, be told what to do. The head of the White House Correspondents Association is a guy named Eugene Daniels. He worked for Politico up until like yesterday. Politico. Now he's leaving to go to MSNBC. Okay, this guy, we just pulled his social media. He is all over his social media in dresses, trying to look like Beyonce. This is a former college football player. Look at this guy. This is the one who's now our press representative at the White House. Look at this. For the listening audience, he's wearing a Beyonce blonde wig with his very large body, sticking his ass out, trying to look sexy, half man, half woman. Okay. And it's also the same guy who accused Brian Kilmeade of racism when he was talking about Kamala Harris going back to her college sorority. And this guy Brian said colored sorority, and ran with that breathlessly to the press, trying to embarrass Brian Kilmeade. Meanwhile, so what an absurd thing for Brian Kilmeade to be accused of. He's been on the air for how many years? He doesn't talk like that. We all know that. And even this guy was forced to dial it back. But what do you make of what's happening now as the press and press pool tries to pretend they cannot be messed with? They're above it all. All we need to do is respect and honor them.
So I have two main feelings about this. One, and I'll sort of start with your stated concern, which I think you preface properly as we don't know yet. But the stated concern is, well, maybe this won't be able, it's an important job. And if the media doesn't decide, it won't be handled as well. What I would say to that is this team that Trump has brought in is the pro team. I know them pretty much all personally, talking with the different cabinet members, not all of them, but, I'd say 75%, 80% of them. I know you do too. These are very capable, competent people that are making these decisions. Stephen Miller, Deputy White House Chief of Staff, is an absolutely brilliant guy. I mean, you look at Caroline Leavitt, I know she's young. She is a superstar. And I know that too, because before she was on the Trump campaign, we tried to hire her for something over at iHeart. So, these are very talented people. And I think, Megyn, they should be given the room to cook, They should be given the ability to handle it their way. If there are problems with the pool, you and I know we'll hear about it. So I think they can figure this out, is kind of what I'm getting to.
Let me ask you this, Buck. Well, the other thing about this that makes me somewhat uncomfortable, and I'm all for pushing back on left-wing bias. I don't have to prove that to anybody, but I do think the independence of the press is important. I realize the press has lost its mind, but it's written right into the Bill of Rights that a free press is one of our most fundamental values. And I'm not sure I'm comfortable with the White House saying, this is who will cover me. This is who I will allow to cover me at all. It's one thing to say to the AP, F you, you've lost your right to be in these intimate spaces. But there is a difference in saying, we will decide, not you members of the press, who gets to come into every space and ask questions of the president. I mean, we could be in a Democrat administration next where they're like, nobody other than MSNBC and the AP can have access ask questions.
I think your example there is though what we've dealt with all Democrat administrations, which is that you effectively have the regime picking regime media to cover the regime. And
yes, but Fox is always in there. Fox is always in there. And listen, this White House is not, they haven't thrown out all left-wing media. It's almost still the pool that they want, dominant left-wing media. I'm just saying the principle of it, if we're going to discuss the principle of it, we're on dangerous ground here.
Look, I absolutely admit that there are complexities here. And I also do want there to be, I think that there should be, no matter how much somebody loves what this administration is doing, and I'm very frank about this, I thought the beginning of the Trump first term, and I think Trump has admitted this, I've talked to him about it, it was messy. They were screwing things up. They didn't have the right people in place, and I bring it up. I don't think that's the case this time around, and it's even gone beyond my expectations, but put that aside for a second. I think that no matter what, you want there to be a degree of at least objectivity in the facts and in the sense of getting facts about what's going on day to day about an administration, because you want them to have, you want people to have some ability to judge what's really going on. Now, that all said, I also think, Megyn, that that this role of the press pool, and you said you had done this, so just
I never did pool, but I did White House reporting.
Right. So I mean, you've been covering the White House. I've never done that role, right? So I don't want to go beyond what I know, but I do think it's quite clear that President Trump is sharing thoughts directly with the people via Twitter or Truth on a daily basis. I think the access that we all have to information, it's not like if there isn't some some press stenographer who's standing there writing it down, we're not necessarily going to know what's happening. I
agree with that, but that's different. President Trump is more accessible to the press than any president I've ever seen. I mean, every day he sits down and gives an hour-long Q&A session.
So help me understand what's the worry.
But
what's the worry?
Because I'm thinking, pick some random blogger in your head. I don't want to insult anybody by naming a name, but just pick some random successful online Substack reporter or podcast host. Who's pool that day and is supposed to be reporting on the president's agenda or his whereabouts. And let's say some major breaking news happens, and that person happens to have a more partisan agenda, which is fine in our daily media, but a somewhat risky for pool. Like, I certainly wouldn't want to receive a report that is openly partisan. It's bad enough when I have to receive one that's subtly partisan from the AP. And so I, as a reporter who wants straight facts, would be like, okay, I don't really want a political pundit, somebody who's in the business of spinning, in there running pool for me. I really don't. And I realize we're talking fine lines here, because the AP is in the business of spinning. Yeah, so that's why we need a variety. But I'm saying that there are responsibilities when you're like the sole pool reporter. Like at times there's one pool reporter who we depend on to tell us what happened to the president. Like, what happened? Who shot him? Who did? And I do think there needs to be a basic minimum standard of having had experience covering the president, having covered the White House, coming from an institution that can cover the costs. By the way, you can't be in pool unless you can cover your own costs, which can be over $100,000 a year.
Again, I think the problem, Megyn, I mean, everything that you're saying, I hear you and it makes sense and it's very rational, but it's like we're assessing a problem that hasn't occurred yet, meaning that they may pick people who are highly competent and do an excellent job. And so that's what I meant by they've brought in the A team so far. So
But why should they get to choose? Why should they get to choose as opposed to the press?
Because I think the press has shown itself to be, I think the whole notion of an objective journalism or objective media is a farce and has always been.
I agree, but it's not for the president to decide who gets to cover him. We will cover him because we are the press.
But who's we? But who gets to decide? See, this is the problem, Megyn. There's a cartel that has existed. The White House Correspondents Association, this I do know a little bit about, having gone to one of their balls, by the way, and thought it was the most boring and self-important and annoying thing ever and never went back. But knowing some of the people involved in that, why should they get to choose? And that's been the case for a long time. So
because
I don't understand.
It's the White House Press Association. It's the Correspondents Association. Why? Like, it's one thing. Everybody, look, and I had no problem with him throwing out the AP, but it's different when the president is saying, I get to choose who's going to cover me. I'll choose the whole list. Once you say you can do that, then he can say only Fox and Newsmax. He could. If we're saying that's an okay thing to do, he could say that. And then the next president could say only MSNBC and NBC or AP. I think when it gets to who goes into that pool and who is responsible for the full-time coverage of the press or the president whenever and whenever he's in the public, it should be up to the press who's on that duty.
But who's the press, Megyn? We keep coming back to this.
Well, in this situation, it's the White House Correspondents Association.
Right, I know. And that's who determines who's in that and why has that been the case?
Well, I mean, are you like Fox News is in it? Jackie Henrick has been out there all week saying this is not a good idea. You don't just go out and buy a life jacket when the boat is already sinking, and you don't buy gold when the economy has already collapsed. Clearly, others are heeding this advice as gold hit all-time highs already this year. It's not too late for you too, and you could have Birch Gold help you diversify into physical gold. Birch Gold specializes in helping you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold for no money out of pocket. One recent 5-star review said Birch Gold was, quote, knowledgeable, helpful, non-pressure. Get your free info kit on gold by texting the letters MK to the numbers 989898. There is no obligation, just useful information. With an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and countless 5-star reviews, text MK to 989898 and let the experts at Birch Gold help you secure your future today with gold. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.